All right, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. I'm Juliet Wade, and here as my guest today we have the awesome and wonderful Kelly Robson. Say hi, Kelly.
Hi, happy to be here.
So Kelly's been on the show before, and we had a pretty good time, I think. But I saw that you had a pretty awesome cover for a pretty awesome Tour.com story. So I figured we should try to pick your brain a little bit. And it sounds like it would be fun to talk about because it has time travel and fascinatingly interesting prostheses, and it has climate change, and it has all sorts of things. So yeah, I'm really glad that you decided to come talk about it.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk about it. There's so the book that we're talking about is God's Monsters and the Lucky Peach. Oh, it's my baby. I have to stroke it. And yeah, the world building goes pretty deep in this one. So, and I'm really happy with it. And one of the things that, one things about the world building in this one is it's a lot of economics. And, and I'm really happy about that because I'm passionate about economics being basically the physics of world building. If the economics don't work, man, you don't have world building.
True. It certainly does seem to leave a lot of gaps and holes if you don't have the economics worked out.
Yeah. But you know, the economics can be pretty simple. When I first started writing, I was doing historical fiction in medieval times. And one of the reasons why I chose that is I really needed to understand. I felt like I really needed to understand how the world worked, and medieval economics seemed to me to be pretty straightforward and pretty understandable. So yeah, so that's where I started with that. I mean, it's not, but.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
No, are you saying something, Paul?
I have my microphone on. Sorry about that. I'll mute it.
Okay. Yeah. So if there's stuff goes on in the background, sometimes we'll just mute people. But anyway, okay, great. So why don't there's so much here, but what I would love to start with is how you initially found your way into this world. What was your entry point here?
Wow. Okay. For the actual story itself, it was pretty cool because Alex and I had just moved to Toronto, and we had gotten ourselves a membership at the Royal Ontario Museum. And at that time, there was this fantastic, amazing, just utterly mind-blowing exhibit about Mesopotamia. And we went to it because we had the membership. Of course, we could go multiple times, and we must have gone 4 or 5 times. And the Mesopotamia is super fascinating economically because they had a centrally planned. Well, I mean, obviously, you know, when we're talking about cultures in Mesopotamia, it goes for about 5,000 years.
Right.
But around the time when I'm writing, which is around 2000 BC, they started having a very complex, centrally planned economy, and where the ruling classes, which are mostly at this point kings and priests and priestesses, really kept a handle on how much grain was being grown and distributed. And they had, oh, hello, look at that. It's Tanya. Tanya joined us.
Welcome, Tanya.
Hi,
So
Juliet.
anyway.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi. So I started, being really, really fascinated about this. But the other thing about this story is, and I'm so excited about this, is you have these kings back like 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, whose job was, and they actually have these ceremonial weapons that are meant for killing monsters. And one of their jobs is to kill monsters with these monster killing weapons, which are the weapons that Shulgi has with him in the book. Shulgi the King is one of the major characters in the book. And Alex and I both found this so fascinating because they knew that there were no monsters. They had never seen monsters, right? Maybe they thought that monsters lived over there somewhere, and if they did the right rituals or, appease the gods in the right way, the monsters wouldn't come. But they knew darn well there were no monsters. They'd never seen monsters. But he's got these monster killing sticks, and he's never killed a monster with them. And what do you think of that as a king, right? You've got this duty and you've never done it. Like, do you just, how do you handle that? Do you just start lying to yourself and tell yourself, oh yeah, I just don't remember it, or the monsters are too scared of me, I'm too big a man, they're not going to come and hang out with me. So that that was my way into the story, is that idea of the fact that we tell ourselves monster stories all the time, and really the only monsters we have are us.
Yeah. Okay, so that's definitely one of the major plot threads of the story that we've got there. How did the second plot thread come to you? I always like the idea of a person with octopus tentacles for legs, or octopus legs for legs, because they're not tentacles. I always also like several of my favorite books are coming of age tales where the person who is coming of age is an old woman. So, for example, Remnant Population by Elizabeth Moon, and The Uncommon Reader by Alan Bennett, and Holy Fire by Bruce Sterling. And I love that idea of somebody actually, finally, even though, they've lived a long life, finally finding their real purpose at the end, or towards the later part of their lives. So I knew I wanted my main character to be this old woman. And the other thing that I knew is that I really wanted a future Earth that could have a connection with ours, but that was emphatically not ours. And one of the things about that I built that was the idea that, so I'd been reading this book called Debt, The First 5,000 Years by David Graeber, which is an amazing book and has everything you need to know about economics in it. It is unbelievable. Highly recommend it. He is a fantastic writer too, like just brilliant nonfiction writer. Cool.
Juicy, fantastic book. So, sorry. So in it, there's a lot of discussion, obviously, of debt. And he basically takes the economic idea of, at the beginning, we started with barter, and we exchanged bananas for shoes and that sort of thing. And he basically says bullshit. He's an anthropologist, and he says nowhere in the anthropological record does that exist. Nowhere. So even though every Economics 101 course starts with this myth of barter, and this is the Adam Smith beginning of the whole economic study of economics, it is utter and complete bullshit. It's a myth. It doesn't actually exist. And it actually doesn't tell us anything about humans and the way humans work. So he illustrates at length how human economic systems actually do work. And they are complex. But one of the other things that he emphasizes is the fact that the idea of debt, about what I owe you and you owe me, is central to the way humans interact with each other. And it's not money debt. We owe each other courtesy. We owe each other favors. We owe each other. We have a give and take among ourselves as human beings. So so he takes the idea of debt as something that is not just about coins, that is about how we actually live together as human beings. So this is super fascinating to me, as I've always worked in professional services firms. And professional services firms are a really unique way to do business, because all you have in professional services firms to buy and sell, is people's time, right? So I used to work with environmental consultants. The environmental consultant firm that appears at the beginning of God's Monsters and the Lucky Peach. I used their names and the name of their company in it. They're good friends of mine from way back. And so my idea was that if in the future we have a situation where robots do all the manual labor, and databases and computers do all of our organizing, and everything is very automated. Some people would say, well, that's a really bad situation because people wouldn't have any work to do, and it's utter bullshit. Because everything in a professional services firm happens because there is no other person to do that work than a person. We have to, somebody has to design the protocols for the robots. Somebody has to manage the robots. Somebody has to readjust them, make decisions. And only people, and even aside from robots and computer programming and all that kind of exciting stuff, the other thing about it is that only humans can manage humans. I'm not going to do what a robot tells me to do, right? No way. And so the world of 2267, which is where my Min is her name, the woman with the octopus prostheses on the cover, where she lives, is based on the idea that the only thing of value in the world is human time. And that is what the economics are based on. It's a post-scarcity world.
In a very interesting way, because of the fact that people are not living where we expect them to.
Well, yeah. And in a way, that's a way for me to... So we all know that climate change is happening. And it's kind of a way for me to simplify the world, in a way. If people are living on the surface of the planet, we're going to start fighting over space, right? And I didn't want to deal with that. I didn't want to have wars. I didn't want people fighting over land. I didn't want land to be something of value. I wanted there to be basically enough land to go around. And so how I built that is that when climate change started really get going in this world, wherever that would be between now and 2150 in my world, the idea was that humanity retreated underground, that things just got basically too hot, too unpredictable. It was too difficult dealing with bad weather, terrible disasters, that sort of thing. And that people retreated underground. And that basically makes it easy for me because I got rid of the idea of the earth being, like the surface of the planet being worth money.
Oh, that's interesting. It's interesting that you have an economic argument for why you would choose to have people that live in that way. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, I also like it because if you go underground, you're living in a completely managed environment. You're living in a, you have to, if you're living underground, you have to live with your own waste. You have to, there is no opening a window for fresh air. So, we live right now, we live in a closed environment. The earth is a closed environment, but it is so large and so complex that we can't see the effects of the choices that we make. If I throw some plastic in the garbage today, as I occasionally do when I'm feeling lazy, although not very often. I am a good girl. Sorry, that was kind of silly. But, you know, I never see the effect of that. I never see the fish that chokes on it, right? But if you're living in for example, the Manhattan of my 2267 is a place called Bangladesh Hell. And it was the first of these underground environments. And it holds economic, as it were, because it is the storied, you know, the place where it all began. It's the Manhattan of my world. It is the place where, you know, all your favorite actors and actresses live, and it's where everything's cool and everything's happening, and they've got all the best of everything. And this is where you want to live if you're living in 2267 in my world. Even if it's a place like that has, I don't know, 250 million people, I haven't really worked it all out. There's no getting away from the fact that you're living in a managed environment. And I like that idea because it is realistic. That's what we're in right now. Closed environment, that is. Somewhat managed.
Cool. So yes, so the story does take us to Bangladesh Hell, which I thought was a very resonant name.
Bangladesh Hell, yeah.
So
I kind of took the Chinese version of the word hell, the where, you know, it's not actually hellish, it's just underground.
Okay.
And knowing that the word hell would bring up these, you know, would evoke terrible things to people, but I like to play with that a little bit.
Yeah.
And Bangladesh Hell's the best place on it. Yeah, the most fabulous Manhattan of my world.
Yeah, and so you've also got, so Min is part of a project to try to reclaim life on the surface.
Yeah, she's so one of the other big things that's going through this book is generational conflict. And Min is 83 years old. And when she was a baby, when she was toddler, 3 or 4 years old, she was actually born and raised in Sudbury Hell, which is a little bit of a goofy thing for me to mention. I don't know if there are any Canadian, well, Tanya's a Canadian. Tanya knows what Sudbury is. And so Sudbury is a place on the Canadian Shield in Ontario here that has actually got huge underground pits and things in it. And they do really interesting science down there, something like you know, capturing ions, because, you know, underground they I don't know, gal gets blocked anyway. So yeah, she was born in Sudbury Hell, and when she was a little girl, the world was getting hit by a lot of pandemics. It was a big public health catastrophe. And so she lost her family. They all died. And she got a really bad case of infectious ringworm and had to lose her legs. So her legs were amputated. And yeah, so
her generation is the one that's called plague babies.
So along with her generation, who are known as plague babies, they are all people who have this shared history of having gone through horrible medical interventions at a young age. So they are plague babies, and they are now very old. They are heading into their sunset years, and they decided, as you know, not completely, but there was a large, you know, flower child-esque sort of generational exodus from the hells up to the surface of the planet, because these people, because of their shared history of having these terrible medical interventions, just wanted to get the hell away from the doctors. Like,
okay,
so they're young adults. They are sick and tired of being poked and prodded, and they have decided to recolonize the surface of the earth. So they're, you know, going up to, they're building arcologies, they're trying to restore ecosystems on the surface of the planet. They're building their own societies up there, and they are basically forging a new path through the world.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the plague babies. So the other generation are the young adults of the time. Min's 83 and Kiki is 23, and she is what is known as a fat baby. And these are perfect creche raised, tank gestated. I don't get into any kind of genetic engineering, so I don't want to say that they are genetically perfect, but they are healthy human beings, healthy people with bodies that are not giving them any abnormal problems.
Yeah.
And they were basically birthed, or their generation was organized by the plague babies, because the plague babies' economy has been interrupted to the point where if they don't have some children, their population is going to go down. And in a world where the only thing that is of value is people's time, when your population goes down, your economy goes down.
Yeah.
So, but Min and her kind, the plague babies, they're basically rugged individualists, right? I can do it all. I can do everything. I'm the best. I'm the strongest. And they don't want to give up power. They don't want to give up responsibility. They don't want to give up anything to these kids that they have brought into the world. They don't. So there's a real boomer millennial sort of situation.
Yeah.
Going on there.
Very cool. Okay. There's a lot here. My pen is flying.
Yeah, I know it's a lot, but I think it really works. Like it
definitely comes together.
It's like so we're talking about world building.
Right.
So we're talking about, what does our society see of value?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of history do our people have, and what kind of generational choices are people making? Because that's pretty important. And I think that's the kind of thing that will go on and on and on throughout human history, is that every generation will see themselves as something distinct from the previous, or their parents' generation.
Yeah.
So that's when you're thinking about world building, I think that's something that you don't often see, but I think humans do that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think we've all seen the pseudo hipster mocking cartoons from like the Regency era. Have you seen those?
Yeah, I think so.
So you have anyway, look them up sometime. They're very cute. So yeah, I mean, people always do that. And the same patterns that we see right now can be adapted, like the patterns that are important to you. Like I find the whole boomer millennial thing like absolutely fascinating, because I'm Gen X, right?
Yeah.
So I like sandwich in between.
Same.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's fascinating. So we find the things that fascinate us about the way the world works and kind of adapt it and kind of switch it around. And I think that gives it power, right? Because you care about it. It's not just something cool that you've thought up. It's something cool that you've thought up that you feel it in your gut.
Yeah, for sure. You have to feel it. So it looks like you had lots of years of research that went into this.
Not really. I read the David Graeber, the first 5,000 years about 3 times, just because I found it so freaking fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But I read a lot of nonfiction anyway, just for fun, for pleasure.
Yeah.
So I just find that and I think we talked about this before when we were talking about Waters of Versailles a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
On this podcast, that what I really like is to read nonfiction, and it just kind of informs my understanding of the way the world works.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I'm not going to remember what their doorknobs look like, and I'm not going to care about, I can look that stuff up later.
Yeah.
But I really need to know how the systems work. I'm a systems thinker.
Mm-hmm.
So
cool. So what I want to tackle next on the grand list of all the things from this amazing story is the question of corporations. And
right.
in particular the time travel corporation, but also the sort of the corporations as entities and their role in this whole world.
Yeah. Well, I always kind of knew that the time travel corporation was going to be the antagonist.
Uh-huh.
Because this is kind of it's a bit of an answer back to Connie Willis's time travel stories, because, and I love Connie Willis. I love her work, and her time travel stuff is fascinating, and it's great. And I also think that it's really fucking unrealistic, because time travel is so powerful. It's powerful, even as in my time travel you cannot affect the present by changing the past. It's just, I just took that out of the equation. But even so, time travel is powerful as a symbol. It's powerful as just something that's fucking cool that people just, like, when you just die to do that, I would cut my legs off. If I could time travel, I absolutely would cut my legs off. Absolutely, wouldn't you? Oh man. So in Connie's world, time travel is just used for historical research, which is fine. I mean, that's obviously it's fine. She designed it that way. That's great, and it all holds together in her stuff. But man, what a waste, right?
Yeah.
And what a waste from the corporation's point of view. Like, can you imagine just people just getting their fingers in there and doing all kinds of shit and seeing what kind of stuff they could do with it? So my idea was that in this world, in 2267, in addition to the hives, habs, and hells, which are the major economic units in the world, which are basically the city-states, who compete with each other in delivering quality of life to human beings, and attract human beings to their cities by offering them better quality of life than other places, or more specific quality of life than other places, because not every human being wants to live the same life, right?
Right.
I really like living in downtown Toronto. You might not. And that's fine. Like, people don't all want the same things. So, I might decide, if I lived in 2267, I might decide that I wanted to live in Bangladesh Hell because I really thought that was cool. But another person might want more space to live and have a quieter life, and they might want to be in Sudbury Hell. Or they might really not want to live underground at all. So they might want to loop to Iceland or Cusco or Calgary, which is where my people are from. Anyway, yes. So, and then there are hives, and they're actually kind of a hybrid. Anyway, the reason why I'm telling you this is that those aren't the only economic units. There are also universities and universities and other sort of vocational training entities. And then there are think tanks, and TURN, the time travel organization, is a division of one of the big evil economic think tanks.
Okay.
So, yeah. And then there are also other economic entities that are really, really like called private banks. And basically, private banks are, if you are the smartest engineer if you invent something really fantastic, if you are like the genius coder who solves like a terrible, terrible problem that nobody else possibly could have. Basically, if you're the one person, if you're the one Steve Jobs genius whose contribution made a real difference to the World Economic Council, who's another big think tank, might decide just to turn you into a private bank. So you now can operate like a bank. You can invest in other banks. You can invest in other city-states. You can start doing trade back and forth. And when you die, you're dead. You don't continue to be a private bank. You get to turn yourself into a university or a think tank or into a city-state, something like that. So as long as your principal is alive, you're a private bank and can do some really interesting things. And this idea is to, this is just to kind of introduce, first of all, I just think it's cool. I think that's just a cool thing. But also to introduce the idea that, you know, some people do make a difference to the world. And that people always people really like to have something to strive for. There are certain people who just want to be world dominating people, and they want to think that they could be that. Someday I could be a private bank. And so I just kind of think that that's kind of cool. Anyway, yeah, so TURN is a think tank, and TURN controls time travel. They have managed to develop time travel in such a way that the World Economic Council has allowed them to retain intellectual property over the technology of time travel.
Okay.
They are in danger of losing that someday, and they really don't want to. So they are very, very secretive, and they do not let anybody see their technology. They do not let anybody fool around with it, and they tell people a lot of lies about it. And they do a lot of counterintelligence, yeah, thank you. Counterintelligence to try and, you know, obfuscate the truth behind time travel.
I want to play this as a board game.
Awesome. Fantastic. Yeah, you could. You totally could. Competing for people and developing shit. Yeah. That would work.
Sounds good to me. Gotta enlist the game makers.
Yeah.
I know someone who makes them. I'll give them a call.
Cool. Awesome.
Okay, so cool. I'm honestly trying to decide which direction to go next because there's so much here, but let's can we well, you've started talking a bit about Min.
Yeah, Min, my main character.
Yeah. She's a very cool character.
She's a fluvial geomorphologist.
Ooh.
Is that not the best?
How riverbeds change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's a river scientist. She's a fluvial geomorphologist. She also, because she's just cool and old, she gets to do other cool things. Like she gets to do snowpack management. Because the thing, sounds great, doesn't it? Because the thing about the plague babies and the people who have gone above ground is that they're all passionate about doing things the natural way, right? So they really want to restore, like they could just Calgary is an arcology. It's I really went with the whole Mesopotamian ziggurat thing. Calgary is a arcology ziggurat, self-contained habitat with a couple million people. And and they are trying to live lightly, though they have this ziggurat, they're trying to live lightly on the ground. And so they have restored the Bow River Valley coming down from the eastern part of the Rocky Mountains in Canada. And So they've restored the Bow River Valley, and they've started restoring the ecology. And it's, it's been 60 years, so they haven't gotten that far. It takes a really long time to restore rivers.
Yeah.
But she got to plant the glacier seed at the Bow Glacier, to start growing the glacier. And they do exciting things like, I haven't gotten into this in the book at all, but I probably cut it out of, when I was revising. They put up wind baffles, huge wind baffles up around the mountains to guide the wind down and to get rain, and to make sure that the rain goes into these particular valleys so that they get the snowpack and they get the water coming through, and then the river comes directly into the city, and basically all the water gets used up there at that point. And what they would like to is they'd like to get all of this restored enough that the water can keep going as well. They can take some of the water and use it, but the water can keep going, and then they can build eventually another arcology, like, a couple 100 miles downriver. So that's what they have been working towards all of their lives. And she's a river specialist. She's a fluvial geomorphologist, and she just freaking loves rivers, and she loves mountains, and that is her thing. And she will never stop. Like, she will die, still doing her work. She's never going to retire, ever.
Yeah.
Have you read John McPhee?
No.
You might wanna.
Yeah.
What is it?
You want to read John McPhee? Definitely.
Yeah, John McPhee. Basin and Range.
Okay, awesome.
It's all about mountains and how the earth moves and how it did the things that it did, and he's wonderful.
All right, excellent.
Cool.
Basin and Rain.
Range. R-A-N-G-E.
When I was working for the ecologist in Vancouver for years and years and years, I got to imbibe a lot of ecological restoration and ecological science stuff, and I edited a few books about it, that sort of thing. But always wanting to learn more about this fascinating stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Cool.
There's also Simon Winchester did The Map That Changed the World, which is basically the history of paleontology and geology.
Cool.
Really, really fascinating stuff.
Oh, I saw an article about that. It was pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
The Map That Changed the World.
It's one of the things that I think that doesn't get a whole lot of shrift in world building is the literal bones of the world itself.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot about what people make and how that works, but nobody's talking about, again, the caverns underneath Sudbury.
Right. And this map, if I'm thinking of the same map, it was a map of the geological formations underneath England, based on rock collections done by this one guy who just basically went everywhere.
Cool. That sounds great.
Yeah.
It was all about the coal mining, because everything ran on coal then, and they didn't have any systematic way of finding where the coal was. They didn't know that it came in seams, and this is why, and all of this stuff. And so he's going down into these mines, and he keeps seeing the layered structure, and it's always the same layered structure. And you go down about 15 layers, and that's where you're going to find the coal.
Right.
And so rather than digging a gajillion test holes for no reason, he systematized, okay, this is where you're going to find it.
Cool.
Because this is what's under the ground. And then when he's down there, he's looking at it going, gosh, these look like big trees. What's that about? And yeah.
Awesome. That's cool.
Yeah. So that's cool. So Che had a question, which is, why did you settle on a novella with this much world building? It sounds like maybe the world building grabbed you first.
Yeah. I didn't know how to write a novel. The story that is contained in this book is a novella. And it has a novella ending. It ends it is the story of Min. It is Min's coming of age story. So that's how I thought of it. But when I try to approach stories as the most important thing that ever happened to a person, or the most important thing that a person ever did.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's what I like to think of a story as. So this was the most important thing that ever happened to Min. This is her coming of age story. So it was never, the first draft was 50,000 words. And when I told people that, they said, oh, why don't you make it a book? I'm like, it would have to be a different story if it were a book. So I don't really know how to write a book yet. So I always knew I was writing a novella, and I'm writing a sequel. And thanks. And the sequel will also be a novella, and it will, very appropriately, it will be Kiki. It will be Kiki's story. So Kiki is the 23-year-old research assistant who is very important in the story. And it's very appropriate because Min is old and has now, at the end of the book, learned the thing that she'd been missing, and the thing that she had neglected to learn her whole life, which is that people matter, and that people matter to her. What? I know. And so then the sequel will be Kiki's story. Kiki will take the story from the moment this book ends, and it will flip over to her.
That sounds cool. So, were you deliberately playing with the juxtaposition of the Mesopotamian artwork and monster concepts and the design of your far future characters?
Not specifically, although I have a wonderful Mesopotamian thing right here, right beside me.
Oh, that's cool.
I got that at Boscone. And now I'm going to not be able to put it back on the wall now that I've taken it off. Okay. There. Oh, I did it. But I love the idea of human animal chimeras. So that is something that I wrote about in Waters of Versailles. And I just kind of like that. So, they were really big into that too. They loved chimeras. So, it's just kind of all the cool richness of human culture, right?
Well, because there's this moment when Kiki takes this very dramatic action.
Spoiler.
Yeah, well, spoiler. Yeah. Okay, spoiler for anybody who's watching the video, right? And she takes this very dramatic action because she's bound and determined she's going to do this thing.
She wants to time travel.
And it's kind of like what Kelly said about wanting to time travel a little earlier in the show. But ends up having an appearance that reminds me a great deal of actual mythology.
So let's not beat around the bush. So
let's
turn off your sound if you don't want to be spoiled. But yeah, so when they are attempting to win this job, because they don't just get to decide to go to time travel and time travel, they actually have to win the work. So the book starts out with Kiki, who is the admin assistant, gets a request for a proposal from the Mesopotamian Development Bank for a past state assessment of the Mesopotamian Trench in 2000 BCE. So that basically the RFP is to send scientists back in time to do an ecological assessment of that time to inform future restoration efforts. And Kiki is freaking out because this is the most fantastically non-boring project she's ever heard of. And she is super excited about the idea of, oh my God, if she could just time travel, right? But she's an admin assistant. She's not even a scientist. So she basically gets in Min's face and says she gets on the team writing this proposal. And she does a lot of research about it. And because Turn is very secretive, there's very little they can find out about it. But this is the work that I do. I write proposals. And when you have a very exciting project that you want to win so bad, you've got to find a way to offer. The only way you're going to win it is to find a way to offer the client something that they didn't know they wanted, and that captures their fancy, right? That makes an emotional connection with them.
Mm-hmm.
So what Kiki discovers through some really good research is that the amount of things that you can take into the past and bring back from the past is restricted by volume, not by mass, but by volume. And Min, being a plague baby, is a very small human being. And she doesn't have any legs, and her prosthetics can roll up. And she happens to have a best friend who is also a plague baby, who is a veterinarian. And he is a little person. And he is also very small. So what they decide is that their strategy is to offer the client a very small team, so that they can maximize their volume for bringing back whatever they need, right?
Oh, okay.
They figure that nobody else will do this, and so they figure this is if this strategy works, they will win it. And Kiki says, well, can I be on the team? Like, I have these skills. She makes a really good case that she has some skills that are really, really going to be helpful. And they basically say to her, yeah, you're too big. She's probably 6 feet tall. She's a big woman. She's healthy. She's strong. She doesn't roll. Her legs don't roll up. And they say, no, you can't. Sorry, you're too big. So Kiki cuts her legs off. And so would I, if I had the chance. Of course, we've got high-tech medical tech that allows her to do this. And though it is physically traumatic, she can recover from it fairly quickly, although not without pain. And she decides to get goat legs. So yeah, but her prosthetics are goat legs. And it's kind of cool. Yeah, mythological.
And then becomes both mythological and able to fold up more effectively.
Yeah.
So, I'm seeing Paul asking a question here. Do you want to ask it verbally, Paul?
Sure. So the theory of timelines and time travel that you have in the novella solves a lot of the grandfather paradox problems I see in lots of time travel stories. But you introduce some new possibilities in the way you have your bubbles of time. So I was curious as to how and why you came up with your theory of time travel for your universe.
Yeah, everyone who writes time travel story gets to organize the rules the way that they like, so that they can tell the kind of story that they want to tell. And what I wanted to tell was a story about how even time travel that is technically useless, it's time travel without consequence, still can get people in terrible trouble. It can have terrible, really, really significant consequences for the world. It has really interesting, significant consequences for people's psychology, the way they start thinking about life and about what's important. And so my time travel without consequences is also really interesting to me, because it's, when you go to the past, there is absolutely no way that you can go to the past and not do damage to the people you meet there. I'm not the only person who writes about time travel who thinks, about that kind of thing. There's an amazing book called Corrupting Dr. Nice by John Kessel, which is about time travel, which is amazing. It talks all about that idea of when you time travel, what does that do to the people who you meet? And what does it do to the people who you bring back with them? So what I really wanted was just the simplest possible form of time travel. And I didn't want any paradoxes because I just really not interested in paradoxes. I'm just interested in people getting into trouble. But we'll see what happens with the sequel.
Well, it was interesting because you did sort of set that up as a premise of the time travel and how it operated. And I was like, but how can we be sure? Do we have to take these people's word for it?
Well, that's just it. Yeah, you have to take the physics guy's word for it. Then they tell you that the timelines collapse when time travelers go. They can do whatever they want. They come back, and the time travel collapses. But there's also some and I want to write some other stories about this because there's still interesting things that you can do with this, right? Mm-hmm. Like the thing that I would do. Okay, here's what I would do if I had this time travel without consequences. So the idea is you go back in time, you hit a certain time, you can never go back there again. You can't keep going back to that timeline and build on what you'd done before. You have to go, you have to come back, or you could stay. But if you stay, like, how do you know you're not going to die when the timeline collapses, right? Like, people don't really want to stay. But what I would do is I would go back in time. I would cure Jane Austen. I would make her keep writing the book that she was writing when she died. And then when I had to go back, I would go back. I would take the manuscript with me. And then I would go back at that very moment in time again, cure Jane Austen again, and keep her like, here, read this and keep going. And then, after I don't know, 30 or 40 trips, you get a new Jane Austen book and it'd be amazing. Wouldn't that be cool? I think that'd be cool. So I've got a story that I'm going to write about that, where somebody is actually doing that. They're actually getting new books out of Jane Austen by doing this. And the great thing about
the new piece that you're writing have a title yet?
It's called Time, Trouble, and the Lucky Peach.
Awesome.
And I'm just drafting it, so we'll be out for a while, but hopefully, maybe
we'll send you good vibes.
Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. Well, I hate to say this, but I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all for being here. It was really great to see some new faces, and I hope you can come back sometime, and maybe we'll have this conversation again the next time you have the next book come out.
Cool, that would be awesome. Thank you, and thanks for listening. It's a joy to be able to go blah 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 about it.
Well, I can clearly tell that there's so much that just wants to bubble up out of you about how exciting this world is, and it's great that we can share that with you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, and I'm going to stop the broadcast.
Okay.